Wonderful. Good morning, everybody. I want you to picture the scene for a moment. A customs officer observes a truck pulling up at the border. Suspicious, he orders the driver to get out of the vehicle and he thoroughly searches it. He pulls off panels, bumpers, wheel cases, but finds not a single scrap of anything contraband, and so still suspicious, but at a loss as to what to do with this vehicle, he sends them on their way. But this isn't a one-off. This happens week after week after week, month after month after month. It goes on even for years. And over that time, this officer tries full body searches, x-rays, anything that he can think of to catch this person out. And each week, they drive up, but no mysterious cargo ever appears. Finally, after many, many years, the officer is about to retire, and the driver pulls up in the usual way. And the officer says to him, "I know that you are a smuggler. Don't bother denying it, but I cannot begin to tell you what it is that you have been smuggling all these years. I'm about to retire, I'm leaving, and I can now do you no harm. But to put my mind at rest in my retirement, would you please tell me what it is that you've been smuggling for all these years?" The driver pauses for a moment and then simply responds, "Trucks," and drives off. Sometimes it is easy to miss the obvious, the very thing that is staring us in the face. But, the thing is, if we don't know what it is we're looking for, then we're not necessarily going to see it. And this morning's talk, as we continue this series looking at practicing the way of generosity, we're looking at watching out for greed. And if we're going to watch out for something, a bit like that customs officer, we need to know what we're watching out for. What is greed? Well, it can be defined this way: a very strong wish to continuously get more of something, especially food or money. Well, today we have an industry that is committed very firmly to fanning the flames of greed, and it is called the advertising industry. There are adverts everywhere, on our TV, as we scroll through our phones, as we drive down the road, as we open up our newspapers. Experts say that we see, on average, 3,000 to 4,000 advertisements a day, all designed to appeal not to our rational brain, but to our subconscious, to our fears and our desires. And now all that advertising is amplified by algorithms designed to data mine for our deepest fears, insecurities, questions, hopes, and dreams by watching the way that we operate and listening to what we say, even from the little things that live in our pockets. I remember when we and I was a bit dubious, is this really the thing? But when we found out we were expecting our first baby, I kid you not, it was lockdown, so we couldn't see anybody anyway, so nobody else could have, secretly told Google what we were doing. But we found out we were expecting this baby, and we noticed within a few hours of talking about it that suddenly adverts on our phone were coming up for baby products. You need this, you need that. If you don't push your baby in this, if you don't do this sleep routine, if you don't do that, then they're not going to make it. And, literally, we just found out we expected a baby. And it was pretty terrifying. I was thinking, oh my word, this is real. But even before our digital era of digital manipulation, the human heart has long been prone to believe the myth of more. The lie that if we just had that little bit more, then we'd be that little bit happier. But here is a truth that cuts across the spectrum of the human experience. No matter how much we get, it's never quite enough. John Rockefeller, the billionaire, business magnate, and philanthropist, when asked how much money is enough, he said, just a little bit more. Benjamin Franklin said, the more of it one has, the more one wants. Well, this isn't a new phenomenon. The writer of Ecclesiastes said as much thousands of years ago. Whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. And we don't need to think very hard to know that money can let us down. That yes, it can be a really good thing, but it can disappoint. It can fail to satisfy our deepest longings. Investments and savings can decrease in value. Events and situations happen in the world which mean money isn't what we thought it was worth. And even when we think we have what we thought was enough, often we discover that it isn't. It's a never-ending cycle. And this all feels a bit depressing, and you're probably sitting here thinking, why on earth did I come to church this morning? But there is good news for us, because Jesus has not left us fumbling about in the dark to try and figure out what we do with this minefield of money. He's got a huge amount to say about it, which is why we're doing this series as we are apprentices under Jesus, learning from him about how we manage this stuff and what we can do about it. And this morning, as I read those two passages, I want us to look first at Luke 12. And Tom's going to be picking this up next week. And so I'm not going to say a huge amount about it, but I think, this verse from Luke 12 just fits so well with our theme. Watch out, Jesus says. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life doesn't consist in an abundance of possessions. Greed is like lust, but for things. It's an insatiable desire for more than we have and more than we need, and it destroys us, or it can destroy us from the inside out. And Jesus is right when he says that there are all kinds of greed in that verse. Because maybe it's a greed for a bigger bank balance, maybe a bigger house, a bigger car, a more elaborate lifestyle, fancier clothing, fancier holidays, all expressed in different ways, but ultimately all about pursuing this drive for more and more and more. And I have been deeply challenged as I've been thinking about this, because I think we are all vulnerable to it. And yet I think we're so slow to see the problem. And maybe it's because we associate greed with characters like this. These dancing people in the middle of the screen. Recognize any of these guys? Maybe this is our kind of like, well, they're the greedy people and I'm fine. It's not about me. But over the 16 years that I've been in full-time ministry, I've had people come to talk to me about all kinds of stuff they're struggling with, and I have spoken to others about the things I'm struggling with, and I think the thing that has never come up is I am greedy. I've never gone to somebody and said, actually, I'm really struggling with greed, and no one's ever come to me to say that. But I don't think that really is the case. As Tim Keller puts it, the money god's modus operandi includes blindness to our own heart. I think we can all be vulnerable to some version of greed, and I think this was highlighted acutely in March 2020, when we found ourselves greedy for things we never thought that we'd be greedy for. As we rushed to the shops to buy our loo rolls, our anti-bac gel, our tins of tomatoes, our pasta that we felt the need to stockpile because maybe we'd be the ones that would get to the shop and there would be nothing left. Scared that we'd be the ones without. In big ways and in small ways, obvious ways and more subtle ways, I think this is something that we are all vulnerable to. And this is why Jesus is encouraging us to watch out. Why, though? Why? Why is it so bad? Well, Jesus says it in this verse that we had read. Life doesn't consist in an abundance of possessions. That is why. It's not where true life is to be found. And Jesus goes on to tell this story of a man in Luke 12, of a man who yielded an abundant harvest. And he builds bigger and bigger barns to kind of fill, to make space for all this stuff that he's got coming in. But ultimately God says to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. And then who will get what you've prepared for yourself? Life doesn't consist in an abundance of possessions, so don't put our hope in them. If we put our hopes in our jobs, then there's a chance we might not keep them. If we put our hope in our house, it might let us down. If we put our hope in our finances or investments or our savings, then we may well lose them as they maybe change in value. But the good news is that Jesus does not leave us hanging at this point with the words, "you fool," ringing in our ears. It's not really Jesus' style. But instead, he goes on to give reassuring illustrations in Luke 12 of how the birds and the flowers don't worry about having enough, and God provides for them. And then he says in verse 32 of chapter 12, "Do not be afraid, little flock, for your Father has been pleased to give you the kingdom." As Tom spoke here last Sunday, we worship a God who is a God of abundance, not a God of scarcity. He's a God who lavishes upon us, his children, upon his flock. But again, even there, Jesus doesn't leave it. He doesn't end by saying, "Don't worry, it'll all be fine. You've got the kingdom coming your way." He gives really practical application. And it might not be what they or we were expecting. In Luke 12:33, Jesus says, "Sell your possessions and give to the poor." Live generously, says Jesus. Live open-handed. You see, Jesus' antidote to greed is generosity. If you're worrying about not having enough, says Jesus, then give it away. It's classic Jesus. It's not what you'd expect. It seems totally counterintuitive, but it's so true. Why? Well, it's what he's been saying all along, because our security doesn't come from our possessions anyway. And letting go of that fear-driven mindset, which says I've got to squirrel it all away so I've got enough, sets us free. Provide purses for yourself, says Jesus, that won't wear out, a treasure that will never fail, where no thief can come near and no moth will destroy. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Put your hope, says Jesus, not in something that can be taken from you, but in something that can never be taken from you. Financial investments, savings, houses, cars, they can all let us down. But Jesus never will. And so he encourages us to put our hope in him, where no thief can come near and where no moth destroys. You see, everything on this planet can be taken from us. And for some of us here in this room today, we know the pain of searing loss. We know what it is to lose everything. Whether that's possessions or people, we know the pain of that loss. And that loss is real, and Jesus does not dismiss that. He's a God who comes alongside and walks with us. But he encourages us that we, whatever life throws at us, we have one who will never leave us or forsake us. One who will not disappoint, who will not depreciate in value, who's not going to leave us alone. We have one called Jesus Christ, who died for us, who rose again, and who invites us into life with him, and he invites us to be his friend. Do you know him this morning? Have you become friends with Jesus? For me, that was the biggest decision I made in my life, choosing at 16 to put my faith in Jesus, not because it's what I'd always grown up doing, but because it's what I believed deep in my heart and I couldn't deny it anymore. Do you know Jesus? There'll be an opportunity, if you don't, to come and chat to people about it. There'll be a team of people here at the front at the end, and we'd love to talk with you and to introduce you to our friend Jesus, the one who will never disappoint or fail you. We've got an online alpha course that's coming up as well. If you would like to be part of that, then there's details on the website. But even better, come and chat to people down here afterwards. We'd love to connect with you. But maybe we're sitting here this morning and we do know Jesus and we are friends with him, but perhaps greed is getting in the way of trusting him this morning if we stop to think about it. I wonder where a fear of lack has taken hold of us today. Where are we letting money control our lives more than Jesus? Well, Jesus' answer to us is let go. What does this look like? How do we let go? When do we do that? Well, the easy answer is now. It doesn't matter if we've got loads or if we've got a teeny tiny amount. We all get to play. It's like all these practices. Whatever stage or season of life we're in, we can all be part of what we're talking about here. Everybody gets to play. And in fact, by letting our heart be formed in generosity when we've got very little, will help when we do perhaps one day have a little bit more. Well, where should we give? Where do we give our money? If we want to take note of what Jesus is saying here, to let it go, well, there is no specific rule, but there do seem to be kind of three primary objects of generosity in the New Testament. One being the poor, and Tom's going to be speaking about that more next week. Another is the church, to fund the work of God in church communities. And by giving into that, which I know so many of us do, we get to be a part of the amazing things that God is doing, even if we're not turning up specifically to those events. As we give, we're funding the life-giving ministry. 10 people got baptized on Easter Day. That's a result of people's generosity and giving, as we see the fruit of that coming. And the work of the gospel. Giving to people whose lives are committed to sharing Jesus. Organizations working to spread the good news of Jesus. The poor, the church, the work of the gospel. Three objects of our generosity. And maybe this week you want to go and think, where can I give? What does this look like for me? And then here's the big question. Well, how much do I give? How much do I give? In 2 Corinthians, Paul writes, each of us should give what we've decided in our hearts to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion. And the thing is, there is no set amount. We're not going to open the Bible and find an exact figure that this is what you should give. But some helpful principles from people who've gone before us include the idea of first fruits, that as soon as we receive money, that we choose to give a little bit of it away. Not once we've done everything we want to do with it, but first. This principle encourages us to give a little bit as part of our worship to our generous God who has already given everything for us, and also before it controls us. And I find a really practical way of doing that is having direct debits that just go out of my account, because I know if I waited until the 10th of the month, I would think of 100 things to do with that money, apart from give it away. Maybe you want to think about how you can do that, how you can give of the first fruits of what you get. Another thing which might be helpful is a generosity fund. Maybe an amount set aside in your budget, and it does not have to be very much, just so that you can just random acts of kindness. Maybe that's just once a month when you go out for coffee with somebody, if that's what you do or whatever you do. Say, look, this one's on me. And just have that as something that you do. Don't just shout and make a song and dance about it, but a generosity fund. And then tithing. The word tithe is from the Hebrew word masa, which means a tenth. And it's an ancient practice of giving roughly a tenth of our income away for God, the poor. And there's so much debate about whether the tithing is required in this day and age or not, and whether this is a requirement or not. Do we give it to the church? Do we give it to the poor? Do we give it to both? I think whatever our view on any of that stuff, that doesn't really matter. But a lot of people over many, many centuries have found this practice of tithing to be really, really fruitful and just provide some sense of guidance as to what we might be able to give for a lifestyle of generosity. And the reality is 10% may be far too much for you in the season of life that you find yourself in right now. And if so, then give what you can. But for some of us, that might be a helpful guide. And in all of this, wherever we're giving and however we're doing it and however much it is, we give what we can, not what we can't. As with all of these practices, Jesus is leading us into a life of abundance, not a life of lack and scarcity. This is not some punishment to make our lives miserable. This is leading us into life, as counterintuitive as it might be. And the crazy upside down thing that I have learned, and which I know as I'm on this journey, and sometimes I get it right and sometimes I really don't. And the same with others that I'm journeying with, is that we've discovered you can't outgive God, because he is a God of abundance. And it's not that we give in order to receive. We've already received everything, as Jesus gave his life on the cross so that we might know life in abundance, eternal life. Every single one of us who put our trust in Jesus. It's not about kind of the receiving, but God is a kind and generous God, and he can't help but bless us and give us life. We will never be lacking as a result of giving. That is what I've come to discover personally in my own life, and I dare you to give it a try. I dare you, because I can guarantee that as we let go, as we live lightly, as we live generously, we will not regret it. And also, as we start to do this, we'll discover a joy and peace, because we're free from this money god that seeks to consume us and tell us that we haven't got enough. And the word used by the biblical authors for this inner satisfaction, this inner peace, is contentment. And it's one of the most underrated virtues in the world. If greed is being unsatisfied and consumed by a desire for more, contentment is the opposite. It's being deeply happy with and grateful for what we've got. It's being free of the desire for more, because we have a security that is greater than anything this world can give us. And that draws us to that passage in 1 Timothy 6, which I'm not going to speak in great depth about, you'll be pleased to know, but which just unpacks this theme of contentment, which brings it all together. You know, in 1 Timothy 6, Paul writes, "Godliness with contentment is great gain." You see, true wealth, Paul says, is not having a lot, but being happy in God and content with what we have. And the times when I've seen this most powerfully, actually, have been in situations like we saw in the Seatoness video, of people dancing and worshiping and praising the Lord and running forward to give in that giving moment in the service, because that's such a significant part of their worship, because they have received so much and they want to give it away, and they do not have much. But it's so, so moving to see that. Godliness with contentment is great gain. Paul's onto something there. We brought nothing into this world, he goes on. We can take nothing out of it. All of our wealth is temporary. All of it. And Paul says, you know, if we've got food and clothing, we'll be content with that. And that Greek word clothing means covering. If we've got the basic things for life, foods, clothing, shelter, as long as we've got God and each other, that's enough. So maybe this week, another practical thing you can do is to take time to thank God for the things big and small that he has blessed you with. Thank him. It's amazing what a difference it makes when we start to do this. I know for us at the moment, as we're in the midst of logistics of moving and babies and all sorts of stuff and loads of things that are not sorted. But actually, and I know this isn't so much particularly around financial giving, but I think it is the same principle. Actually, this being thankful for over the last week, I have really sought to thank God for the things that have been sorted and for the blessing that we have, including you guys here, as part of this church family. That actually, as I've started to do that, my mindset has changed. There's still a lot that's uncertain. Circumstances haven't changed, but my perspective has. And I think that that can be applied to generosity. And then Paul writes this: "For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil." And I think as money is the root of all evil, it isn't. It's not the root of all evil. Money itself is not evil. It can do great evil, but it can do great good. I think of the power of generosity, not only of generosity, but business, to make the world a better place. God is not opposed to wealth. He's not opposed to it, but the misuse of it And so when it becomes the love of our lives, that is when it becomes a problem. That is when it becomes a problem. It's powerful. It's like nuclear energy. It can bring life or it can bring death. And it's really hard to steward well, which is why Jesus tells us that we need to watch out for greed. I'm going to finish by reading these words again from 1 Timothy 6, which Si read to us, because I think they just echo so beautifully the words that Jesus shares and that we've been looking at and will continue to look at in this series over the coming weeks. Command those, Paul writes, who are rich in this present world, not to be arrogant or put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and be generous and willing to share. In this way, they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so they may take hold of the life that is truly life. Greed says take. You never know where the next thing is coming from. Faith says give. Jesus has already given us more than enough, and we can trust him. Greed says this life is all there is, so you better make it as comfortable as possible. Faith says there's a lot more than this life. Live lightly, because eternity is coming. And so the invitation for every single one of us this morning is to take hold of something. Not money, not possessions, not more and more and more, as the world would tell us we need. But take hold of the life that is truly life. We're going to pray and stand and continue to sing and worship now. So if I could invite you to stand and the band to come up.